Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and as you know from the Atlas patch, Stormcaller was rather nerfed just a bit, and I've recently remade a Stormcaller in Inquisitor form that is now crit, still CI though, and it's called Still Not Blade Vortex, level 88 at the moment, Templar Inquisitor, and I'll show you the passive tree and go over that rather soon. But the nerfs that we're talking about were the Stormcaller Helm Enchant went from 45% to 30% reduced duration, and less duration went from 29% damage down to 19%. So small nerfs here or there, and don't worry, your Blade Vortex is still fine, that has not been ruined. But Stormcaller, a slight nerf, and it's still rather good. Now, as you may remember, my last Stormcaller about a month or so ago was an Elementalist. It was non-crit, and it was when Stormcaller was just a little bit stronger. Now, personally, I do think that one was a bit more fun just because Elementalist had the pro lifts and it felt nice and you didn't have to rely on crit or charges or anything like that. But when I made that, I did mention that you could make an Inquisitor version, and that's what I've gone ahead and done just to try it out and see if it's better or worse. Ultimately, the damage looks better, but the playstyle is a little bit clunkier and probably just a little bit worse. And also you can, this build doubles as a ball lightning build if that's more your cup of tea, as you can see here. There's absolutely no difference in the passive tree or even the gems for ball lightning. You just have to sub out less duration for something else and get a different helm enchant. But I'll go over a few of the boss fights with Stormcaller in the end game, as I've now tackled everything including Shaper. Then I'll go over the character for you and show you the Shaper attempt. So I should mention that just about everything up until these Guardians in the tier 16 maps was no problem whatsoever. It's just that these guys have such an increased amount of life, and that means you have to play a lot more sustainably and a lot safer throughout your entire attempt. So I'll speed up most of these kills after showing you just initially what it's like. And the biggest difference between this character and my previous one, the Elementalist, is I don't have the 80% chance to avoid stun boot enchant like I did on that one, because I was too lazy to get it on this one. I'm not farming Uberlab for that shit, and I couldn't be bothered buying one. So this character is rather prone to stun because I don't have an Eye of Sheila or anything else really. So you'll see throughout this fight that whenever a tornado spawns on top of me, for example, I will get destroyed by it because it basically perma-stuns me. So I die a few times on this very first fight that I come across him with, but I also rolled a fairly bad map for myself with Burning Ground, meaning I can barely ever recharge, and it's also no regen, which made my mana a bit uncomfortable. All in all, the damage on this Guardian and on all the Guardians seemed to be pretty good for what I thought. I didn't think it was going to be as bad as this. I did think I'd have better damage, but in the end, once I got the hang of it, and the fact that I'm still about 20% off of my max damage, means these Guardian fights weren't all that bad, and the Phoenix in particular, very manageable, especially if you have enough stun resistance to get through this. Right now I just quite don't, so I did die to tornadoes a couple of times, but it's a very manageable fight otherwise for a ranged character, or in particular this Stormcaller. As you can see, for a lot of the fights I also do try out ball lightning every now and again to make sure it's not the better alternative, and for the most part it seems to not be. Stormcaller's just a bit better damage wise and positioning wise, but I think all the fights should be doable as ball lightning as well. The Hydra was a fight I was really afraid of with my character because I don't really have any freeze immunity besides the flask, and that will go down eventually. And otherwise, yeah, I just thought the cold damage would freeze me a lot, and her attacks would be too hard, and it'd be too hard to dodge. All in all, this was actually a very manageable fight. She doesn't even hit me that hard, and the balls and all her attacks basically only chilled me when they hit me, and never actually froze me, so that's very manageable. And the DPS was a lot better than my Dreamfeather character that you should have seen a Guardian kill or two of by now. So I was pleasantly surprised with this one for the Hydra. The damage was good and the survivability wasn't all that bad. And in the end, it's probably my best character to take on the Hydra so far. So I may keep him geared up for future Hydra maps if I want to take them down. Now, this isn't a very hard boss roll on it though for the map mods. If it had more substantial map mods, it'd probably be a lot harder to manage. I will say that, like minus max for example, or even some attack speed or whatnot. But all in all, I'm pretty pleasantly surprised at how this character went here, and certainly the damage it pulled off. So I have done a few Hydras now, and they're all pretty comfortable. The Chimera was a pretty damn hard fight for this character because my leech is largely based off of Warlord's Blasphemy. I'm not always in range, and Warlord's Blasphemy is less effective leech against bosses because it is of course a curse. So I can't really stand there and face tank too well, and besides that I pretty much have to dodge everything. The damage is okay when I can actually stand still and get some good damage in, but the real problem comes during his second and third phases when he starts doing smoke clouds, and I basically just can't sustain running around while finding him in those smoke clouds with my ES defenses, whatever you want to say, because he just keeps on poofing around and hitting me, and I'm just degenning. I'm just dying, losing health, and eventually I will die if I don't find him fast enough, which did happen a few times. The fight overall, or this video, is rather long, kind of boring. I'll spare you most of it and just cut through here or there. The ads were pretty comfortable, but the fight himself for the Chimera was pretty challenging given the defenses and the nature of this character. Here is an example of what I'm talking about. I'm diving around a bunch of times trying to find him. I don't find him in time, and he just keeps on hitting you. The graphic was bugged there as well, so you couldn't even see him hitting me. And long story short, you just have to dodge pretty much everything. Isn't a problem for the most part if you play it well enough during this sort of phase, but during the smoke phase with this character it was really tough, and I couldn't really reliably do it. So it seems like getting down the Chimera is going to average me about 1 or 2 deaths most of the times, but besides that it's fairly manageable. This is where we finally kill him and say, fuck you, Chimera. Took something like 3 deaths on my first attempt here, and yeah, it's manageable like I said, but not the funnest fight. The last Guardian fight that I had to take care of was the Minotaur, of course, and at this point I'd done the other 3 pretty reliably, and I obviously killed the Shaper already by now, so I was feeling pretty cocky and I just kind of went into it without expecting too much, and the map roll was kind of tough. He's got Fleet on him, which is attack speed, cast speed and movement speed, as well as 100% extra fire damage. So with those combined, that meant I basically had to do a lot of kiting and basically never stand still or take too many hits. I think on a normally rolled map I probably could stand still and burn him down a lot better or faster, but in this scenario I had to do a lot of running around and dive through a lot of those pylons, electricity pylons, which slowed me down quite substantially, but the damage was good on him, and overall, if I just play it correctly and safe enough, then yeah, Minotaur is also very manageable. So, in conclusion, I would say pretty decent character for all 4 Guardians. It does take a bit of play every now and again, however, but compared to the other characters I've made since Dreamfeather ST, this is by far the second best one for all the fights, including Shaper, and a very manageable build to play in the end game at the moment, though probably not my favorite. I'm not quite sure. Stormcall just didn't do it for me as much this time around. The Elementals was probably more fun. So I'll show you just a quick rundown of gear and setup before I take you to the Shaper fight. First of all, the Templar doesn't really know how to wear microtransactions to save his life. It just always kind of looks shit on him no matter what you do, but this is the best setup I could find, and it's mostly gloom stuff. In any case, the main differences between this and the last character were that I'm not wearing a Pledge of Hands because I needed to stack more crit. So self-crafted a crit dagger here. It was pretty easy to make, only took a few hundred ults. You're looking for a lot of crit implicit, crit on the dagger, some damage to spells, doesn't really matter which ones, lightning or cold are best though, crit multi and some spell damage. Then self-crafted a shield, got a eye level 84 base titanium and put some Screaming Essence of Woes into it until this happened. There's no spell damage, there's fairly minimal resists, and there's no crit. So it's not the greatest shield, but it does have a lot of energy shield, so that fills out a lot of that, meaning with items like this, this, and this, I did not have to run Discipline, and that's why you don't see it in my build right now. I fucked up with a Val Regalia by turning in the Ethereal set, which is 7 cards to get an eye level 80 6-link Val Regalia. Mine's eye level 73, which doesn't end up being a big deal. Still crafted it with Screaming Essences of Woe, which are, 9 chaos each, and eventually got this. It's good enough, even though it's nothing amazing. The Helm enchant, I had to buy a clear base. It's 1.5x when I bought it, 30% reduced Stormcall duration. It's not even that crucial to use anymore, it's just quality of life, and it's still recommended. I then crafted that with a few Screaming Essences of Woe, I think, as well. Beyond that, the gear is not terribly good or even hard to get. Face breakers, as always, 90 crit multi. Self-crafted a crystal belt with using some other sorts of essences, a resist essence I believe. It's not that great. Ideally I wanted some strength on there for more Warlord's Mark levels. Bought some really crappy boots. These cost like 3 chaos or something. Just want some movement speed, some ES and some resists. And a amulet for 10 chaos, I believe. You're looking mostly for cast speed and crit multi. Anything else on top of that is a bonus. Strength and dexterity you'll probably need too. Now, as far as unique items go, we're running a Call of the Brotherhood, so that turns half of my lightning damage into cold, as you can see. Without it, full lightning almost. With it, half-half. So that means you will be freezing things a lot more, and that's your main defense mechanism. Beyond that, there's also Dodri's Damning, so that I could get both Assassin's Mark, this guy, as well as Warlord's Mark into the build. So Assassin's Mark comes into play with Curse on Hit, Herald of Thunder, and Herald of Ice. That's the autopilot version, which keeps up your power charges. And then the Tryhard version, which is your Orb of Storms, drop an Orb of Storms, and that will curse everything pretty much on your screen. Orb of Storms, Power Charge on Crit, Curse on Hit, Assassin's Mark. So it's also your single target curse basically, and your Power Charge sustain when you actually need it against bosses and hexproof maps. And since we have a lot of AoE, Orb of Storms is pretty good and pretty reliable, especially with its crit chance too. For Warlord's Mark, I'm running just Warlord's Mark and Blasphemy, so just always around you, but bear in mind you won't be hitting things like pretty much at the edge of your screens for Warlord's Mark. Shield Charge, Fortify, and Faster Attacks is mostly our movement skill, and that is of course bolstered by the Quicksilver too. So Fortify gets kept up quite often by Shield Charge because of the area that we have, and I'd recommend that over Whirling Blades. The Val setup, Val Clarity, Val Discipline, Val Haste, attached to increased duration. You're only really ever using Val Discipline in tough boss situations, otherwise for mapping, Val Clarity and Val Haste. Now the main setup itself, in order of importance, I would say Stormcall, less duration. We'll then go with Echo. I then went with Crit Strikes, increased area, and then Controlled Destruction. So Controlled Destruction is pretty huge for your damage, and you could argue that Crit Strikes should be your 6th link instead. And then Conk Effect over increased area for boss damage and all that. Sometimes you will need to run a Mana Flask because mana's kind of shit otherwise, and Warlord's Mark won't always be on something. Sometimes you will have to take Herald of Ice off during boss fights just so you have more mana unreserved, and so that you can Mana Flask and then keep things going. Otherwise, I typically run a Silver Flask. Besides that, there's a Diamond Flask, there's an Atziri's Promise, a Quicksilver, and a Stibnite. And fully buffed my crit on Stormcall, at the moment only 52, with all my power charges, which are up basically all the time, is 75 crit, and that's fairly sustainable, fairly reliable, and so is the Diamond Flask to bring that up to almost 100%. Not much else to mention then. I don't think the average damage of the Stormcall fully buffed just in town here is 17k, and that goes up based off of this Inquisitor passive when you cast and attack stuff, so there you go, 17k average. Fully buffed at something like 25k I think, and then Conk Effect of course brings it to another level. So it's about probably in total twice the damage of the Elementalist, but it plays a little less smooth. Passive tree, it's a very generic crit spellcaster passive tree, so you can basically put any skill you want into this rather than just Stormcall. The only thing that's particularly specialized are the jewels, where I have some lightning skill crit multiplier and some lightning damage every now and again. Otherwise, yeah, very homogenized tree that you can make any CI caster with, really. You got to get some Vile Pact action happening, plenty of crit all over the place, and some decent ES. So as I said, you could even use Vortex, though I'm not tanky enough really to justify vortexing things on this build. I don't think, anyway. The character was pretty enjoyable for what it was, just not as much for me the second time around Stormcalling. If Stormcall is your cup of tea, go ahead and try something like this. This is by no means a final build and the best version of the build. It's just how I managed to build it in a couple of days. I think there should be more perfecting and better ways to find certain things out. That said though, I will probably just put up the Shaper Kill in a separate video, as this one has kind of gone a bit too long and I won't put you through that right now. The Shaper Kill will be uploaded in another video if you want to see that. It's a fairly lengthy fight because it's not very easy for a character like this, but overall ended up being pretty fun, and I'd say viable is the word we're gonna fucking go with. Thanks for watching this one. Hope you had fun. Hope you enjoyed the video, and see you guys next time.